He didn't even hesitate. A library, and maybe a place for kids who don't have one, like a home. I blinked, stunned. That's a big idea. He shrugged. Well, it's a big house. And just like that, the decision was made. I sold off the Whitmore antiques, shut down the trust funds, and redirected the value into something real, a community space. Not just a center for reading, but for learning, telling stories, sharing voices that had been ignored. A place for truth. We named it the Monroe Center for Legacy and Learning. Micah helped with the name. He said it had to be about us, not them. When we held the ribbon cutting, I didn't invite the Whitmores, not out of spite, but because that place wasn't for them. It was for kids like Micah, for girls like I was, for anyone who had been told they weren't our kind. Still, Nathan came, quietly, no cameras. He stood in the back during the ceremony, hands in his pockets. Afterward, he approached me, eyes lowered. "I don't know how to say sorry," he said. "You just did," I replied. "That's a start," he nodded. "If you ever need help here, I'd like to earn back a place." We didn't hug, we didn't cry. But there was something in that moment, something closer to real than anything we'd shared in years. I didn't forgive him all at once, but I didn't shut the door either. Micah gave him a tour of the new library. They laughed once over a comic book, and I let myself hope. Hope. That's what I walked away with in the end. Not revenge, not victory, just hope. Hope that the cycles could stop with me, that legacies could be rewritten, that blood doesn't define value, and silence doesn't protect it. People ask me if I ever regretted bringing Micah with me that day. I tell them the truth. If I hadn't, I might never have found my voice. It took a 10-year-old boy, half of me and all heart, to crack open a lie my family had wrapped in generations of pride. He didn't do it for money or power. He did it because something in him believed truth mattered, even when adults chose comfort over it. And in the end, that truth didn't just reveal a hidden will. It revealed me. I was never meant to be erased. I was never too much. I was never the shameful daughter or the broken branch on the family tree. I was the one meant to bloom where they said nothing could grow. Now every time I walk through the Monroe Center, I see kids reading, creating, learning. I see parents who look like me. I see teachers who speak with warmth. And I see Micah's mural near the front entrance, a painting of a tree, half of it decaying and gray, the other half bursting with color. At the bottom, he painted the words, "Truth is the root. Love is the legacy." He didn't sign it. He said he didn't need to, but I see him in every brushstroke. If this story moved you, if it made you think about truth, family, or standing your ground, don't just scroll away. Like the video, so more people can hear stories that matter. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded that love and legacy don't always come from where we expect. And please, drop a comment below. Tell me what part of this hit you the hardest, or how you've had to reclaim your own voice. If you want more real, raw, and powerful stories like this one, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's next. Until next time, stay brave, stay loud, and always choose truth. They say family is forever, but some lines should have been broken a long time ago. I stood on the front steps of my mother's estate with my son's hand in mine, my palms sweaty even in the cold autumn air. The Whitmore mansion, tall, cold, and proud, looked exactly how I remembered it, unforgiving, empty, despite the grand white pillars and endless windows. It had been over a decade since I'd last been here. I was barely 21 when I walked out of this house with nothing but a duffel bag and a belly full of nerves and hope. I had just told my parents I was marrying Malik, my college sweetheart, a kind, brilliant black man who had a smile that made me believe I was worth something. My mother didn't speak to me for months. My father said I was reckless. But the real words they didn't say were written across every pause. He's not one of us. Now I was back, not for them, but for my grandfather's memorial. Judge Richard Whitmore Sr., a man I respected once, before I learned he stood silent while his daughter cast me out like trash. But still, I brought my son, Micah. He's 10 now, sweet, thoughtful, loves space documentaries and drawing comics. He looks more like Malik every day. As we walked up to the door, Micah squeezed my hand. "Are they nice?" he asked. I hesitated, unsure how to answer. Some of them might be, I lied, offering a tight smile. Before we could knock, the heavy oak door creaked open. My mother, Cecilia Whitmore, stood framed in the doorway, dressed in mourning black with pearls knotted tightly around her neck. Her eyes went straight past me to Micah. No smile, no warmth, just calculation. Behind her stood my brother Nathan and Uncle Calvin, still leaning on that stupid cane he didn't actually need. "Josira," she said flatly, as if my name tasted wrong in her mouth. She didn't look older, just colder. "You brought him." I nodded. "He's my son. Malik's son." She paused, then turned to Nathan and said it so clearly I felt like the ground tilted. "She can bring her kid, but he has to stay outside." I thought I misheard. I stared at her, trying to fill in the silence with something reasonable, but then she looked me square in the face and said, "He's not our kind." Micah flinched like someone slapped him. He looked up at me, confused, then back at her. I felt something break in my chest. I could have screamed, cried, but I just nodded and said, "All right." I turned on my heel, gripping Micah's hand tighter, tears burning behind my eyes but refusing to fall. We didn't need this. We didn't need them. We were halfway down the steps when Micah pulled on my arm. "Wait," he said quietly. "Should I tell them what I found in Grandpa's office?" I stopped cold. "What did you find, baby?" Micah reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded paper. "It was in his desk," he said, voice low but clear. "I wasn't snooping. The drawer was already open, and this was just sitting there. I didn't read all of it, just some, but I think it's important." Behind us, I heard footsteps creak on the porch. Uncle Calvin had stepped out now, brow furrowed. "What's he talking about?" he asked. Micah didn't flinch. He unfolded the paper, holding it like a shield. "It has Mom's name on it, and something about the house." I glanced back at my mother. Her face had drained of color. "What exactly did you read?" she asked slowly, voice suddenly tight. Micah looked at her, calm and steady. "It said my mom is the rightful heir, that she's the only one who ever stood for the truth." There was a silence so thick I thought the house might collapse from the weight of it. My mother looked at the paper like it might explode. That's when I realized this wasn't just about racism or pride. It was about hiding something, something big, and my son just cracked it open. I never imagined coming back here would feel like time travel, like stepping into a memory I never wanted to revisit. The Whitmore estate sat on 14 acres of land, surrounded by old oaks and whispering pine trees that always made me feel like I was being watched. The gravel driveway was still freshly combed, like someone had been up since dawn making sure the house looked perfect for the memorial. My family was obsessed with appearances. It didn't matter how broken things were behind the walls, as long as the roses were trimmed and the linen napkins were folded just so. I had avoided this place for 11 years. The last time I was here, I was crying on the front lawn while my father locked the door behind me. I had just told them I was pregnant with Malik's child and that we were getting married. My mother said I was ruining the family name. My father didn't say anything. He didn't need to. His silence was punishment enough. They made it clear I was no longer welcome, not as a daughter, not as a Whitmore. I left that night and never came back. So why did I return now? Because Grandpa Richard had died. And despite everything, he was the only one who ever showed me a sliver of warmth. He wasn't vocal about his support. He never stood up to my mother, but he'd send letters every Christmas, short ones, handwritten, just checking on Micah, asking if I was safe. He never said sorry, but somehow his silence carried less venom than the rest of them. Micah deserved to know where I came from, not just the pain, but the history, the pieces that made me, so he could understand the ones that made him. Even if the people who lived in this house never accepted us, I thought, maybe, just maybe, they'd changed with age, or grief, or both. The estate was the same, whitewashed brick, tall black shutters, wrought iron gates. Everything about it screamed old money and older opinions. I parked our rental car under the magnolia tree, the one I used to climb as a kid when I needed to get away. Funny how I still needed an escape route before I even went inside. Micah unbuckled his seatbelt and looked around with wide eyes. "Whoa, this is where you grew up?" I nodded. "It looks prettier than it felt." He smiled gently. "Kind of spooky." like it has secrets. I chuckled. That's because it does. Micah was wearing the navy blazer I bought for him last week. He kept fidgeting with the sleeves. I knelt down to fix the collar. You nervous? A little, he admitted. Are they going to like me? That question broke something small inside me. He was 10. He shouldn't have to worry about being liked by people who should have loved him by default. I kissed his forehead. You're going to be fine. You're polite, kind, and smarter than all of them put together. If they don't see that, it's their loss. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. As we walked toward the house, I started rehearsing lines in my head. Small talk, polite words, nothing too emotional. I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of seeing my guard down. I was here for the memorial, and then I'd be gone. The front porch creaked under our feet. The columns still had that ivory gloss my mother insisted on redoing every year. The wind blew softly, rustling the massive American flag draped above the doorway. Always there, always performing. I hesitated before ringing the bell. Memories flooded in. Christmas mornings, cold stares, forced dinners, and silence. Me crying into a towel the day I told them I was pregnant. Micah squeezed my hand. Ready? I took a breath. As I'll ever be. Then the door opened, and everything changed. The moment the door opened, I felt that same chill I used to get walking into this house barefoot at night. Cold. Not from the air, but from the people inside it. My mother stood in the doorway like she'd never aged, hair pinned up in the same tight French twist, pearls wrapped around her neck like a noose, black dress, black heels, expression blank. She looked at me, and then her eyes dropped to Micah like he was a stain on a white carpet. There was a pause. Too long for a greeting, too short to be silence. Jasira, she said with the same voice she used on waitstaff, formal, clipped, unimpressed. You came. I told Calvin I would, I said. We're here for Grandpa. She stepped aside half an inch. Not enough to say we were welcome, just enough to make a decision for us. Behind her, I could see Uncle Calvin in the foyer, already sipping something dark from a crystal glass, and Nathan, my younger brother, hovered near the staircase, pretending to study his phone but glancing up with eyes full of nervous guilt. Micah shifted closer to me. He knew. Kids always know. We're sorry for your loss, I said gently, hoping to break the ice. Micah wanted to come. He wanted to say goodbye. That's when my mother turned her head slightly toward Calvin and Nathan and said it, just loud enough for me to hear. She can bring her kid, but he has to stay outside. At first, I thought she was talking about the dog. Then I remembered. We didn't have a dog. My jaw locked. Excuse me? She looked right at me, calm, unapologetic. He's not our kind. Those 5 words hit harder than a slap. My ears rang. I blinked at her, stunned. I searched the faces behind her for some kind of reaction, some flicker of humanity. Nathan looked down. Calvin sipped his drink and said nothing. Micah turned to me, confused. What does she mean? I could barely breathe. We're leaving, I whispered. My mother didn't move, didn't blink, like this was just another chore to cross off her list, exclude the embarrassment, maintain the image. I turned, gripping Micah's hand. My nails dug into my own palm as I tried to hold back the burning behind my eyes. He didn't ask any more questions. We stepped down the porch stairs together, me walking fast now, my heartbeat like a drum in my ears. Shame, rage, pain, all of it colliding in my chest, and just underneath it, disappointment in myself for hoping they'd changed. We were halfway to the car when Micah tugged at my sleeve. Mom, he said. Wait. I stopped, looked down at him. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I think I found something in Grandpa's office, he said quietly. I didn't mean to snoop. The drawer was already open. My breath caught. What kind of something? I don't know. It looked important. It had your name on it. From behind us, I heard the slow, deliberate creak of the porch again. Uncle Calvin had stepped outside now, one eyebrow raised. My mother appeared just behind him, her expression suddenly not so confident anymore. What's that? Calvin asked, squinting at the paper in Micah's hand. Micah didn't flinch. He looked up at them, at these towering adults who had just rejected him, and held out the paper like it was a badge. "I think it's a will," he said. The air turned sharp. Nathan stepped out now, his voice shaky. "A will? What are you talking about?" Micah looked at me for permission. I nodded, my voice still caught in my throat. He unfolded the paper, careful not to tear it. It said Mom is the rightful heir to the estate. Grandpa wrote it in his handwriting. I saw his name at the bottom, and it said, she was the only one who ever told the truth. For a moment, no one moved. The breeze rustled the magnolia leaves. A car passed in the distance. And in the center of it all stood my 10-year-old son, exposing a secret that had been buried, possibly on purpose. My mother's face paled. Uncle Calvin stepped forward, eyes narrowing. "Give that to me," he said. Micah didn't budge. "No," I said. "Not until I read it." The silence was different now, not cruel, afraid. They thought they could erase me, but they didn't count on Micah, and neither did I. The silence that followed Micah's words felt heavier than anything I had experienced in that house before. I looked down at the paper in his small hand, creased from being tucked in his pocket, smudged a little with graphite. It wasn't just a random document. The way my mother's lips pressed into a pale, quivering line told me it was real. The way Uncle Calvin's shoulders stiffened told me it was dangerous. "Micah," I said softly, "can I see it?" He nodded, placed it gently in my hand. It was a photocopy of a handwritten will, dated just 2 months before Grandpa Richard passed. The signature was unmistakable. I'd seen that looping, firm handwriting on birthday cards he used to send me before my mother found out and forced him to stop. At the top, in careful cursive, it read, "Amendment to Last Will and Testament." I scanned the lines, and my heart started pounding for a new reason. "To my granddaughter, Jasira Monroe, born of my daughter Cecilia Whitmore and of my blood, I leave the Whitmore estate, its holdings, and its legacy. I make this decision not out of sentiment, but justice. She is the only member of this family who has ever confronted truth without shame. The others may not understand now. They will." Below it, 2 signatures, Grandpa's and Calvin's, as a witness. I raised my eyes and looked directly at my uncle. "You signed this," I said, louder than I meant to. "You knew." Calvin cleared his throat, but it didn't help. His voice still cracked. "Your grandfather was sick, confused. That document wasn't legally binding. He had another will." "No," I said, holding up the paper. "This is dated after the original, and it's signed. It's witnessed. It might not be the version you wanted, but it's real." My mother finally found her voice. "You don't know what you're doing, Jasira. You're going to drag this family's name through the mud over some childish—" "No," I said again. "You already dragged it there. I'm just pointing at the stains." Micah stood beside me like a statue. He didn't understand the full scope of what was happening, but he understood enough that his mom wasn't going to be dismissed, not this time. That his grandfather, complicated as he was, had left a door open for us when everyone else tried to nail it shut. Nathan stepped down the porch steps now, his face pale. "Let's just talk inside. Maybe this is all a misunderstanding." I laughed under my breath, not out of humor, out of disbelief. "You all stood there 10 minutes ago and let my son be humiliated like a stray animal. You didn't blink. You didn't say a word. And now that this document threatens what you think you're owed, suddenly you want to talk? Jasira," my mother started. "Number. You don't get to say my name like it still belongs to you." I folded the paper, tucked it into my coat pocket. My hands were shaking, but not from fear anymore, from clarity, from years of pain finally meeting something solid, a piece of proof that said, you were never the problem. They were. I looked at Micah. "Come on, baby, we're going." "You're not taking that," Calvin said, stepping forward. I raised a brow. "You going to stop me?" He hesitated, and I saw it, the flicker of doubt in his eyes, not because he was scared of me, but because he knew the law. He knew this could upend everything they thought was sealed tight. I turned to my mother one last time. "You tried to erase me. You raised me to think I was less, but I left, and I became more without you. You tried to push my son into the shadows, and he dragged your secrets into the light. Then I turned and walked down the steps, Micah's hand in mine. We didn't run. We didn't shout. We didn't need to. Because for the first time in my life, they were the ones left behind. The moment that paper hit my palm, the balance of power shifted. Micah stood beside me, quiet and calm, but I could feel his little heart pounding through our joined hands. His fingers trembled slightly, but his gaze was steady. It reminded me of his father, strong when it counted most. I unfolded the document slowly, trying not to let my emotions blur the words. It was exactly what he said it was, a supplemental will, typed in clean format but hand-signed and dated at the bottom. The final addendum to my grandfather's estate planning, clear, concise, and devastatingly powerful. To my granddaughter, Jasira Monroe, it began, I leave full control of the Whitmore estate, including all associated properties, assets, and inheritances. She, and she alone, has demonstrated the character, honesty, and courage befitting the legacy of this family. I do this not in rebellion, but in reckoning. My name. Right there in bold ink, signed in my grandfather's unmistakable handwriting, a notary stamp and signature alongside it. The witness signature. My eyes froze. Calvin Whitmore, Uncle Calvin, who now stood across from me with a suddenly pale face and a glass of whiskey shaking in his hand. You knew, I said, holding the paper up like it was a weapon. You witnessed this. You signed it. You were there. Calvin's mouth opened, then closed again. He looked around, searching for someone to back him up, but the family was frozen in place. Nathan stared like he was watching a slow-motion train crash. My mother had gone stone still, her lips pressed so tightly together they'd turned white. He wasn't in his right mind, Calvin said finally, voice low and defensive. He was emotional, confused. He didn't know what he was doing. We'd already finalized the estate months before. But this is dated after that, I snapped. 2 months ago. It's signed, witnessed, legal. I felt something stir inside me, something I hadn't let surface in years. Righteous anger, not the panicked kind that burns quick and leaves you breathless. This was the slow, steady kind, the kind that had been boiling for a decade and finally broke the surface. You all stood there, I continued, not 10 minutes ago, and told my child he wasn't welcome in the home his great-grandfather left to him. And now, the moment he exposes a truth you tried to bury, you want to pretend it's just a misunderstanding? Cecilia stepped forward at last, her voice sharp and thin. You don't understand the damage this could cause, Jasira. Your grandfather wasn't thinking clearly. That paper was never meant to leave his desk. But it did, I interrupted, and now it's here, and it changes everything. She moved closer to me, eyes narrowing. You always had a way of taking what didn't belong to you. I met her gaze head on. I'm not taking anything. I'm claiming what was already mine. Micah tugged on my sleeve. Mom, he whispered, are we in trouble? I looked down at him, and suddenly the weight of the moment cleared. I knelt to his level and cupped his cheek. No, baby, we're not in trouble. They are. His little face lit up, not with glee, but with understanding. He didn't need revenge, he just needed truth, and he had delivered it. I stood up and faced my mother one final time. You taught me to be ashamed of who I was. You told me love was a threat. You let this house become a shrine to silence. But I survived. I grew. And this boy, this not-our-kind child, you rejected without even giving him a chance. He's the one who uncovered the truth your entire legacy was built to hide. Nathan finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Jess, is it really legal? I turned to him, softer now. You tell me. You went to law school. Looks pretty binding to me. Calvin said nothing. His silence was its own confession. I tucked the document into my purse, wrapped my arm protectively around Micah's shoulder, and turned to leave. They didn't try to stop me this time, because they knew. The girl they threw out had come back as a woman they couldn't control. And her son, her beautiful, brilliant son, was the one who had exposed them all. I thought we'd leave right then, but Micah had other plans. As I turned toward the car, clutching the folded document like a lifeline, Micah stopped walking. He looked up at me with those big, steady eyes and said, "Mom, can I read it to them?" I hesitated. "You don't have to. We've done enough." "I know," he said, "but I think Grandpa wanted them to hear it, from someone who still cares about truth." The boy was 10 years old and somehow wiser than every adult on that porch combined. I nodded. "Okay, go ahead." Micah stepped forward slowly. His blazer sleeves were still a little too long, but he stood straighter than I'd ever seen him. With calm hands, he took the paper from me, unfolded it carefully, and looked up at the porch, where my family stood frozen. "I'm going to read what Grandpa wrote," he said clearly, "because it matters, even if you don't want it to." The air was completely still. Micah cleared his throat and began. "To my granddaughter, Jasira Monroe, born of my daughter, Cecilia Whitmore, and of my blood, I leave the Whitmore estate, its holdings, and its legacy. I make this decision not out of sentiment, but justice. She's the only member of this family who has ever confronted truth without shame. I have hidden things. My name has stood for tradition and legacy, but I failed the people I loved. I watched my daughter tear her own child from this family, and I said nothing. I knew she did it to protect appearances, not to protect the truth. Jasira chose love, she chose integrity, and she chose a man who would have made this family better, not worse. This child, Micah, is of my blood, of my name, and of my future. He represents the very thing this family feared: change. But change is coming, whether we want it or not. And I would rather it come with truth than with lies." Micah looked up. The silence was deafening. My mother's face had gone pale. Nathan stared at the ground as if hoping it would swallow him whole. Uncle Calvin swore softly under his breath, finally grasping that the power they thought they had wasn't power at all. It was a mask, and the mask had just been torn off by a 10-year-old boy in a clip-on tie. Micah folded the paper again and handed it back to me. "That's all he wrote," he said. I bent down and whispered in his ear, "You did something brave today." He looked at me, half proud, half tired. "So did you." Then something I never expected happened. Nathan walked down the steps toward us, slowly, cautiously. He stopped a few feet away, looked me in the eye, and said, "I didn't know about the will." I swear I nodded, guarded. "But you knew about the hate." His jaw clenched. He looked away. I was scared. I didn't want to lose what I had. "And what do you have now?" I asked, not cruelly, just honestly. He said nothing. Micah leaned into my side, his voice small now. "Can we go home?" I nodded and turned away from the house, the porch, the family that had spent years pretending I didn't exist. We walked to the car together. I opened the door for Micah and helped him buckle in. My fingers still trembled, but not from fear this time, from release. As I slid into the driver's seat, I looked up at the Whitmore house one last time. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was walking away from something. I felt like I was finally walking toward something real. 2 weeks later, Uncle Calvin tried to challenge the will. The attorney I hired, sharp, fierce, and not remotely intimidated by Calvin's last name, shut it down immediately. The document was legitimate, witnessed, dated, notarized. The estate belonged to me. Technically, I now owned the entire Whitmore legacy, but I didn't want it. So I made a different choice. I announced I was donating a large portion of the land to build a community education and outreach center, focused on literacy, youth leadership, and historical truth. We called it the Monroe Center for Legacy and Learning. Micah helped design the logo. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, he whispered to me, "I think Grandpa would have liked this." "I think so too," I said, eventually. And with that, I realized something. My family didn't just lose their inheritance. They lost their illusion, but I found something they never truly had: peace. It's strange how the quiet moments come after the storm. 2 weeks after the reading of Grandpa's will, the Whitmore house was mine, legally, entirely, and without dispute. Uncle Calvin's challenge didn't make it past the first court date. The document Micah found was bulletproof. Even Calvin had to admit, under oath, that it was real. My mother never showed up to the hearing. She sent a statement through her attorney that said she had no comment. I thought I'd feel triumphant, but I didn't feel like I'd won something. I felt like I'd buried something. That house wasn't just brick and wood. It was pain layered into walls, silence pressed into rugs, and a family trained to smile through cruelty. I didn't want it. I didn't need it. What I did need was healing. So I sat down with Micah one afternoon in our small kitchen back home. We were eating sandwiches, his feet swinging under the table, when I asked him, "If you could do anything with the Whitmore land, what would you do?"